right. Hello everyone. My name is Benjamin, and today I would like to introduce to you a project I've been cooking up in my spare time for the last 2 years. It's called Wolkenwelten. It's a voxel survival game that's completely free software and open source. It basically is in development for 2 years. It runs on Raspberry Pi at 60 or close to 60 FPS and 720p. So like efficiency has been quite the focus for me. Size is also something that has been quite important to me. So for example, it fits on 1.44 meg floppy disk. It's very portable, and yes, as said previously, it's licensed under the GPL version 3. Although there is one downside, it is mostly written in C99. Now you may ask yourself, who is this joker that comes to Lisp conference and talks about a C program? There is one last thing. It contains a custom Lisp dialect. That's been written from scratch with the specific intent of enabling basically modding and changing behavior to this game. It's called Nurgle. And you can think of it as something similar to the role that eLisp is playing in Emacs. So you can use it to change the behavior of the game as it is running. It is a very small embeddable Lisp1. The syntax is mostly inspired by a common Lisp, scheme and closure. Basically, the parts are like most about each of these implementations. It does use brackets for the most part instead of parentheses, just because they are easier to type on the layout I'm using. And it's very specialized for use in soft real-time systems, basically games in this context. It is still very early in development, only for about a year or so, but it already is working quite well for the purpose I've been developing it for. And yes, continuing on, some parts about the internals. The evaluator is written in C, but the macro expander, for example, is written in Nurgle itself. So, for example, this is also being used for bootstrapping, because the macro expander can be used basically in a ahead of time fashion where it just pre-expands the compiler itself and then uses the pre-expanded form, basically to run the compiler. There also is a bytecode compiler, assembler, and disassembler, which is written in Nurgle, although that is still quite experimental and it doesn't really work for all the test cases yet. So it will switch to that soon. It's also supporting WebAssembly since day one. That's quite the important platform for me, and extensive test suite. So thank you for your time. Are there any questions? Yeah? I did try that, but like with most implementations I have been looking at, most got me like 80 or 90% of where I wanted to go. And in the end, I kind of decided that I have to live with all of the little implementation details, so I thought to myself I'd kind of like to do it on my own, because then I have complete control over every little detail. Because especially something like garbage collector latency is super important for me, and it's probably not something that I want to change in another implementation. All right. Apart from that, one last plug. The source code is available on GitHub and SourceHut. You can find it here in the links you see here. In addition to that, I'm also regularly streaming development of these projects on Twitch under the name Melchizedek6809. And there's a website, Wolkenwelten.net. Thank you for your time.
Up next is Joao Tavora. Joao? Any other questions? While Joe comes down. Yes, go ahead.
The size you said, 1.4, the floppy disk size.
Yes.
Does that include the Lisp interpreter and etc.?
That's everything.
Please repeat the question.
Okay. The question. No, the question was like the size, 1.44 megabytes. What does that include? That includes everything. That's basically a 7-zip archive file you can download off the web, which includes the whole game engine, all the assets, the Lisp interpreter, everything. So I mean, as a fun fact, the screenshot you saw is almost twice the size of the entire game. Yeah, 1.4 megabytes.